Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. It's good to be with you here on this Wednesday afternoon, January 14th. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. It's good to be with all of you here on this mid-week, mid-afternoon flight of a Falcon 9 rocket as currently planned. SpaceX is at the moment within an hour from the planned liftoff of the rocket that you see here at the center of your screen, which is standing in the launch position at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape. Current departure time is 1:08 p.m. Eastern, 1:08 p.m. Eastern, 18:08 UTC for our friends around the world. Spaceflight Now photographer John Pisani is running the technical operations of our broadcast today alongside our editor, Stephen Young. Photographer Adam Bernstein has been out and about in the field amid somewhat blustery, cloudy conditions, making sure all the cameras are set up and focused, pointed the right direction, all that jazz in preparation for the ascent of this Falcon 9 rocket. If you're not following our photographers on X, you can find them at their handles here on your screen. John is at John Pisani Photo. Adam is at Aburn NYC, and Michael is at MD Kane Jr. Also, be sure to follow Spacelight Now simply at Spacelight Now. You can find us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook if you yourself are not on X. As the clock continues to tick down, we are T minus 57 minutes, 10 seconds away from the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. However, as you may have gathered by just looking around the pad, weather is not the most ideal for a launch today. Coming into this opportunity, the 45th Weather Squadron meteorologists forecast a 60% probability of violating weather for this window. In other words, there's just a 40% chance for favorable weather with the launch opportunity today. You're looking at the wide view here, and the culprit for the bad weather. Meteorologists were tracking the potential interference from thick clouds and cumulus clouds and their potential to generate lightning when the rocket passes through, which is why it is a potential constraint to launch today. Could also be that SpaceX adjusts the T0 and pushes further into the window. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, clock continues to tick down, just passing the 56-minute mark. SpaceX will make the call on the start of propellant load at around T minus 38 minutes. And so we would expect, if there's an adjustment to the T0, for it to happen before or right about when the clock reaches that point. So we'll keep a consistent eye out for any changes to the launch time today. And of course, if any arise, we'll be sure to let you know as soon as possible. In the event that SpaceX is unable to launch today, they do have a backup opportunity tomorrow. The weather does improve quite a bit, going from a 40% chance for favorable weather up to 75%. However, SpaceX trades potential interference from the thick cloud layers rule today for the potential obstacle of the liftoff winds tomorrow. Liftoff winds with today's launch window were estimated to be between 12 to 18 miles per hour Tomorrow, that bumps up to 18 to 28 miles per hour. Also, the booster recovery weather deteriorates tomorrow as well, going from a low risk today to a moderate risk tomorrow. And for both days, the upper level wind shear is rated as a moderate risk on a scale of low to moderate to high. So, lots of potential weather snafus out there that SpaceX will have to evaluate as it decides whether or not it's in a good position to tank the Falcon 9 rocket in preparation for the launch of 29 Starlink satellites. All that being said, though, certainly thankful for the more than 500 of you who are with us live at this point in the count. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into our live launch coverage today. I also want to thank our moderators in the chat for being with us, Jeff Hansen and Astro Joe. If you do see any of the other mods cruise on in throughout the course of the coverage, be sure to give them a big old Spaceflight now hello. You can make the mod's job that much easier just by following our live chat rules. We ask that you post your message in English so that the mods can respond as appropriate. Also, that you hold off from delving into topics of over politics or religion. And don't post your message in all caps, if you would please. Emojis are perfectly fine. We just ask that you don't create a huge block of them so that other people can see their message posted and not have the visual landscape of the live chat taken up by one huge chunk of emoji. Last but certainly not least, we ask that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated, and we'll all get along swimmingly. Also want to thank one of our channel members, Cumulus Granatus, for being in the chat with us today to help answer folks' questions as we cruise on through the count. Speaking of channel members, this and every other live launch opportunity are made possible in no small part thanks to our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So big thanks to folks. As the case may be, my mother, Mary Robinson, who is with us today, alongside other channel members, S. Nate, of course, the aforementioned Cumulus Granatus. And it looks like that may be it for the channel members at the moment. We'll continue to pop on into the chat and check for member comments as we cruise on through the course of the countdown today. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Among the things that are in our shop is the Crew 11 mission patch. And of course, later today we are going to be covering the return of Crew 11, currently set to undock from the International Space Station at 5:05 p.m. Eastern. That's 22:05 UTC for our friends around the world. Crew is scheduled to splash down off the coast of California in the pre-dawn hours of Thursday morning. That's set for, let's see, right now, splashdown is scheduled for 3:41 a.m. Eastern. That'd be 0841 UTC. T minus 48 minutes, 41 seconds, and counting. The Falcon 9 booster that is supporting today's Starlink mission has the tail number B1085. This will be its 13th trip to space and back, which means it's a little bit too fresh in the Falcon fleet to have earned a spot among the Falcon 9 frequent flyers. With the recent launch of B1078, here's what the list looks like at the moment. Got a two-way tie for the fifth place spot. Of course, B1067 continues to lead the pack with currently 32 missions to its name. SpaceX is working to certify its booster fleet for up to 40 flights apiece. Just past the 48-minute mark, which means we're less than 10 minutes away from when SpaceX, generally speaking, will make a call on the start of prop load. It does its readiness pull electronically, so it can make that determination really ahead of that T minus 38-minute point in time, but that's generally speaking when that does happen. So before we go ahead and get into the process of SpaceX fueling its Falcon 9 rocket, barring a change to the T0, let's go ahead and talk about the countdown timeline and the milestones still ahead for SpaceX before the fueling gets underway. Again, things kick off, generally speaking, with the determination about prop load at T minus 38 minutes. Fueling will begin once the go ahead is given at the T minus 35-minute mark. At this point, SpaceX will load RP1, a rocket grade kerosene, on board the Falcon booster and upper stage. At the same time, liquid oxygen will begin to flow on board the rocket's first stage. T minus 30 minutes is when SpaceX starts to load a cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage, and they'll do the same for the second stage a few minutes after that. The helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. T minus 23 minutes is when second stage RP1 loading wraps up. Then at T minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is the start of the strong back chill down. At this point in the count, SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines there at the pad prior to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage tank. We see this visually as the big vent, which will start here at pad 40 at T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. The vent lasts roughly 4 minutes in duration, with second stage lock load beginning at the 16-minute mark. 7 minutes out from liftoff is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines begins. This involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. 6 minutes before takeoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T minus 4.5 minutes is when the strong back retract sequence begins. SpaceX will first open up the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and it'll stay in that position until liftoff. At that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. T minus 3 minutes is when the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. About a minute after that, same is true on the second stage, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds before liftoff, we'll hear the call that the Falcon 9 is entering into its automated startup, which means that control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and at the same time, the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch determination at T minus 45 seconds, The engine ignition command will be issued at T minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Once again, currently targeting 1:08 p.m. Eastern, 18:08 UTC, or in T minus 43 minutes and about 18 seconds. Time currently T minus 41 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. Again, we're just a few minutes away now from the point at which SpaceX needs to make a determination on whether or not conditions are as good as they're going to be today, and they're going to start the fueling process for the Falcon 9, or if in fact they'll try to bide some more time and punt a little bit further into their launch window. As the clock continues to tick, we've got about a minute or less remaining for SpaceX to make the call on whether they're going to continue on towards the start of fueling this Falcon 9 rocket. As a reminder to folks in our audience, SpaceX no longer, and hasn't for some time, shown live the deployment of their Starlink satellites. Here's a video from a previous Starlink satellite release just to illustrate what it looks like. The full stack will separate from the Falcon 9 rocket's upper stage together, and the arms that are holding the satellites in place will retract and fold into the body of the Falcon 9. Just passing T minus 38 minutes, and the clock is still ticking, so presumably the go ahead has been given for SpaceX to start fueling, and we'll watch for signs of that in the next several minutes. Again, tanking will begin at T minus 35 minutes if in fact the go ahead has just been given. Following the release of the Starlink satellites, the upper stage will perform a final deorbit burn, lighting up the Merlin vacuum engine for one final ignition, pushing the upper stage back through the atmosphere where it's designed to burn up and reduce the odds of creating unnecessary space debris on this mission. T minus 35 minutes and counting. The SpaceX clock still moving. This would indicate that SpaceX has now begun fueling its Falcon 9 rocket at the pad. We're going to be watching for visual confirmation of this, but worth noting that if SpaceX is able to launch today, and at the current T0 of 1:08 p.m. Eastern or 18:08 UTC, this will be the fastest turnaround here at Pad 40. Clocking in at exactly 45 hours since the last Falcon 9 launch here, which would break the previous pad turnaround record here at Space Launch Complex 40 by about 5 hours. In fact, back in December, on December 11th, when SpaceX launched their 161st Falcon 9 of 2025, The vice president of launch, Kiko Donchev, posted to social media noting that they had achieved a new pad turnaround record at that point of 5 hours and 44 minutes between the launches of the NROL 77 mission and Starlink 90 as a marker of how fast potentially SpaceX will be getting in the future. Kiko noted in that tweet, quote, the rocket was actually ready to fly at roughly 40 hours, but we needed to wait for the optimal deployment T0. Love seeing us continue to improve on our speed, efficiency, safety, and reliability. We once thought it was crazy town to launch from the same pad in 2 days. Now it feels crazy not to be launching from the same pad multiple times a day. Physics is the only constraint. Everything else is just an engineering challenge waiting to be solved. End quote. So as we're seeing that engineering challenge being solved in real time, they're chipping away closer and closer to that 40-hour turnaround with a launch here at 45 hours from the previous one. And we are starting to see visual signs of frost building on the Falcon booster, a good visual indication that, as the clock seemed to indicate, SpaceX is in fact fueling its Falcon 9 rocket there at Slick 40 and is going for this record pad turnaround that we were just discussing. Time now, T minus 27 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. If you're just joining us, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the Starlink 6-98 mission, a flight to carry 29 Starlink V2 Mini optimized satellites into low Earth orbit. As time continues to tick down, SpaceX is in the midst of fueling its Falcon 9 rocket there at Space Launch Complex 40. If you missed the remarks just a moment or two ago, this will be a new pad turnaround record for SpaceX, breaking their previous record of 50 hours, 44 minutes, and busting that down to just 45 hours since the last Starlink mission. Taking a quick peek at our live chat, first off, want to thank the more than 1,000 of you who are watching along with us live. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream to allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Secondarily, I want to address a question from Diane Korzek asking if we were going to be covering the undocking of the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour later today. The answer to that is yes. We will have coverage of that undocking happening around 4:30 is our planned start time, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. The the Dragon spacecraft is set to undock from the International Space Station, the Harmony module, at 5:05 p.m. Eastern, 22:05 UTC. Splashdown off the coast of California, currently set for 3:41 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. Again, the undock of Dragon from the space-facing or zenith port of the Harmony module on the space station, currently set for 5:05 p.m. Eastern, 22:05 UTC. 25 minutes remaining on the clock before the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket here at the pad. At this point in the count, SpaceX is loading that cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first and now second stages, which will be used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Today's mission is the 13th launch for the booster flying in support, which is tail number 1085 in the SpaceX fleet. Ahead of the so-called big vent, which is the visual signal that SpaceX is chilling the feed lines at the pad prior to loading liquid oxygen on the rocket's upper stage. Let's go ahead and take a beat to talk about the booster history for Falcon 9 first stage that is supporting this mission. It's tail number B1085. This booster began flying in support of the Starlink constellation, though that was not its original intent. The first mission was supposed to be the launch of the SpaceX Crew 9 mission aboard Dragon Freedom. However, in transporting the booster from SpaceX testing facilities in Texas here to Florida, there was some water intrusion, and in the process of ensuring that the fixes enacted by SpaceX went to plan, both SpaceX and NASA decided that the best move would be to fly the Starlink 10-5 mission, which happened on August 20th. That was followed up by the aforementioned launch of Crew 9 on board Dragon Freedom on September 28th of 2024. Another Starlink mission was up next for this booster on December 17th, or excuse me, November 7th. That was Starlink 6-77. That was followed by the launch of what was ultimately revealed to be a GPS satellite, Space Vehicle number 7, which launched under the name of RRT-1 initially, later revealed to be the Rapid Response Trailblazer, the moving up of SpaceX's contracted launch of a GPS satellite assigned to the company under the National Security Space Launch, or NSSL, Phase 2 contract. SpaceX would then go on to launch another GPS satellite in a swap with ULA, who will launch a later mission with the next generation of GPS satellites, the GPS 3 follow-on, or GPS 3F. And for those of you who've had a chance to check out our article that we published yesterday, another swap between Falcon and Vulcan has taken place so that the Space Vehicle number 9 GPS satellite will be launching here in the very near future on a Falcon 9 rocket. In exchange, ULA and its Vulcan rocket will fly the third of the GPS 3F satellites, which was originally planned to fly on a SpaceX Falcon Heavy. Again, you can read more about that on our website right now, spaceflightnow.com. Back to the booster history, though. The next flight for this booster was in support of a moon-bound mission, Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost Mission 1, along with iSpace, a Japan-based company, and their Hokuto R Mission 2, which unfortunately had a less successful outing than the very successful Blue Ghost. Both launched jointly on January 15th of last year. That was followed up by the second crewed mission for this booster, Fram 2, on April 1st. We'll go ahead and just throw up the rest of the missions that this booster flew, since we are right now seeing the start of the big vent. Right on time. Again, this is the visual indication that the chill down is underway as expected before liquid oxygen begins to flow on the rocket's upper stage. 20 minutes and counting to the liftoff of Starlink 6-98. Now just past T minus 17 minutes. The big vent has less than 30 seconds remaining before it wraps up. Second stage LOX load will start at T minus 16 minutes. Time now T minus 15 minutes, 10 seconds, and counting. The launch today is set to be the 588th launch of a Falcon 9 rocket to date, the sixth so far in 2026. So before we go ahead and see this Falcon fly, let's take a beat to talk about the workhorse vehicle for SpaceX, the Falcon 9 rocket, which stands at a height of 70 meters or 229 feet. It has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. The majority of that is made up by the Falcon's first stage booster. Again, for those who missed it earlier, the booster flying today has the tail number 1085 in the SpaceX fleet, going to be making its 13th trip to space and back. At the base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Today, SpaceX is using the vessel called a shortfall of gravitas. Above the first stage is the rocket's inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. You'll see those grid fins deploying shortly after stage separation, which is roughly 2.5 minutes post liftoff. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the vehicle's second stage. At first stage, main engine cutoff. High pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure that clean separation that I just mentioned. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until the point of stage separation. Speaking of the rocket's second stage, the upper stage is powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It is equipped with a large nozzle, which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight to place the 29 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. Like with the first stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 burns the same propellant mix, RP1 and LOX. Following deployment of the 29 Starlink V2 optimized satellites, there will be one final deorbit burn, which will drive the upper stage back into the atmosphere. Finally, at the top of the stack are the payload fairings currently encapsulating those Starlink satellites. The fairings are made up of a carbon composite material and stand 13.1 meters or 43 feet in height and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. Two fairing halves will be jettisoned about 3 minutes into the flight and recovered a little bit further downrange from where the booster lands on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. Just about 11 and a half minutes remaining before the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket today. Taking a look back at our live chat, I want to thank channel member Chuck Close for a very generous $25 super chat. Thank you, Chuck. Good to see you this afternoon. Also want to thank channel member Ian Lita for a $5 super chat. Says, hi, Will, team mods, and Cumulus Granatus. Gotta run. Take care. Hope you have a good afternoon, and thanks for stopping by, Lita. Our eagle-eyed photographers have noted they're just about the bottom of the frame. You can spot one of our manatee friends cruising by our cameras. So good eye to John and Adam for spotting that. Of course, during the winter, you can find the manatees hanging out in a number of locations here and around Brevard County. If you want really good views of them yourself, obviously from a safe distance, I would recommend going up to Blue Lagoon State Park. They've got a really nice viewing area. When the water is clear and there obviously isn't a lot of rain creating a disturbance with the water, you can usually see quite a few manatees cruising by from their watch points. We also get lucky from time to time and see them here in the Turn Basin at the Kennedy Space Center press site. And of course, for those who go quite a few places along the Indian River Lagoon, they can also be spotted at various marinas and parks dotted along the river. Just under 9 minutes remaining before the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket here at Pad 40. Coming up in roughly 1.5 minutes, SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. That'll help protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage at startup. Just about 7 minutes remaining before the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket here from Space Launch Complex 40. Before we get pad level views of the Falcon 9, in addition to SpaceX mission audio, let's go ahead and take a beat to talk about where this Falcon 9 rocket is going to be flying once it does leave the pad. Once the Falcon 9 lifts off, it will fly on a southeasterly trajectory upon leaving Florida's Space Coast. Less than 3 minutes after liftoff, the first and second stages will separate, with the booster following the red arc you see here on your screen, and will target a touchdown on the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. Assuming a successful landing, this will be the 139th touchdown on this particular drone ship and the 559th booster landing for SpaceX to date. And again, SpaceX wants to recover both the booster as well as the payload fairings, which, once they splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, they'll be brought aboard SpaceX recovery vessel and then brought back through Port Canaveral, where they'll be turned around and refurbished for future missions. Just about 4 minutes remaining in the count. At this point, SpaceX is preparing for the start of strong back retract. The clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings should be opening, and the transporter erector, the strong back, will recline away from the Falcon 9 rocket just a few degrees, and it'll stay in that position until liftoff. We're working to bring in the SpaceX broadcast for you here in just a moment. So as soon as that's ready to be incorporated into our stream, we'll have those visuals and that mission audio for you as well. We're coming up on T minus 3 minutes, the point at which SpaceX will have reached flight levels for the Falcon 9 first stage booster, completing loading of liquid oxygen on that part of the rocket. With stage one liquid oxygen load having wrapped up, SpaceX will next turn to finishing LOX load on the rocket's second stage. That should happen about the T minus 2 minute mark. Stage 2 liquid oxygen load has wrapped up, and SpaceX is now releasing the remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines there at the pad. The ground gas closeouts.
Ground gas closeouts.
We're coming up on the final point at which SpaceX will make the determination that they are entering into the automated startup sequence, and then the SpaceX launch director will make the call that they are go for launch. If that is the case. Just a quick note here, you'll see the clock in real time
Falcon 9 is in startup.
is ahead of the SpaceX count, so we'll be making our callouts based off of real-time events.
LD, go for launch.
And with that go for launch determination, we are less than 30 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. "15 seconds. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff on the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 6-98 mission. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower, creating a new turnaround record at this pad of just 45 hours. We're now just a little more than a minute into flight. Coming up next, SpaceX will throttle down on the 9 Merlin engines as the rocket passes through max Q, point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Now passing max Q, throttling back up, heading into the cloud, so we're switching to the SpaceX feed. Again, we're about 15 seconds ahead of the SpaceX feed in real time, but now that we're above the clouds, we'll go ahead and rely on the SpaceX timeline of things.
And back chill.
Thermal conditioning of the Merlin vacuum engine. That was the call that you just heard. Now passing 2 minutes into flight in real time. Coming up next will be a few events in rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO. That's about T plus 2 minutes and 24 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation and then the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine on the rocket's second stage. Payload fairings will jettison right about at the 3-minute mark. In real time, we're just about hitting second stage engine start. Let's listen in.
MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
And back startup.
Good visuals, good callouts. Now awaiting the deployment of the payload fairings.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And a nice view of the Starlink satellites for a moment as the payload fairings fall away back to Earth. Those will be recovered by a SpaceX recovery vessel a little bit further downrange from where the booster is set to land on the drone ship today. A little more than 4 minutes into the flight on the SpaceX timeline of things, about 4.5 minutes in real time. Coming up next will be the 3-engine entry burn, which is set to begin just a little past the 6-minute mark in flight. Some really nice views from the Falcon booster today. So you can see with the telemetry data on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, the rocket is making its descent towards the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. A successful recovery today would be the 559th booster landing for SpaceX. There's occasional puffs you see between the grid fins. Those are the cold gas thrusters. And now we'll look up through the inner stage on the left-hand side of your screen. So far, a nominal mission by all accounts. As on the SpaceX timeline of things from their clock, we're now just about 15 seconds away from the start of the entry burn. Entry
Stage
burn
1 FTS has safed.
is underway in real time.
Stage 1 entry burn startup. Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Stage 2 FTS has safed.
With the conclusion of the entry burn, we also heard that call out regarding the flight termination system on the rocket's second stage, which has been safed, no longer needed at this stage in flight. We're a little more than 7 minutes into the mission from the SpaceX timeline of things. Coming up next will be the start of the single engine landing burn on the booster. That's set to begin just a little before T plus 8 minutes. And that will take the booster all the way down to what will hopefully be a soft landing
Stage 1
safely
transonic.
on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. Booster now traveling below the speed of sound. And as a reminder, after we wrap up with views of the landing, we will have our launch replays for you, roundup of all the views of liftoff.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing burn. Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And a good touchdown for B-1085, completing its 13th trip to space and back.
MVAC shutdown.
And we have a nominal orbit insertion.
And with a good confirmation of that nominal orbit insertion, the upper stage will now coast until T plus 53 minutes 52 seconds. There will be a 2-second burn on the upper stage to circularize its orbit, and the Starlink satellites will be deployed at T plus 1 hour 4 minutes and 59 seconds post liftoff. And as promised, we've got those launch replays ready for you now. So let's go ahead and get those geared up and we'll bring them to you. We start with the fixed view here at the press site by our Adam Bernstein. Moving on to the wide view next. Onto the turn basin next. And onto the press site tracker, finally from Adam. And with our replays now behind us, let's go ahead and turn on over to the mission stats as they currently stand. With a good liftoff and landing of the first stage booster, that marked the 13th flight for the booster tail number 1085. This was SpaceX's 588th Falcon 9 launch to date. the 6th of the year so far. This was the company's 522nd Falcon booster reflight, the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was also SpaceX's 165th orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 302nd orbital flight from Pad 40, and the 357th overall orbital flight from this pad as well. Here's a bar chart representation of the Falcon family of rockets this year and years gone by. Moving on to some recovery stats, this was the 139th good landing on the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. This was SpaceX's 458th drone ship landing, the 559th SpaceX booster landing, and the 560th overall successful landing of an orbital class rocket, including Blue Origin's Never Tell Me the Odds booster last year. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 4th orbital flight from Florida in 2026, the 6th from U.S. soil, the 6th from a U.S. rocket company, and the 9th orbital launch attempt around the world. Still just one orbital mishap so far. Taking a look at the Cape bar chart. Here is where our pie chart currently stands. We had the one mishap from India with the 3rd stage failure of their PSLV rocket. 2 launches so far from China in 2026 with their Long March 6A and 8A rockets. I lifted off on yesterday, actually on the 13th. And that'll go ahead and do it for our coverage here of the Starlink 6-98 mission. As a reminder to folks, we'll have coverage later on this afternoon of the return of the SpaceX Crew 11 quartet. That's going to be undocking from the ISS at 5:05 p.m. Eastern as things currently stand. And then later on, we've got, later on in the week, I should say, we're looking towards the launch of the NROL 105 mission. That's coming up on Friday from Vandenberg Space Force Base. That's in the evening time frame with the launch of presumably more Starshield satellites. And then coming up on Saturday, the emergence of the Space Launch System rocket from NASA's Vehicle Assembly Building, live on your screen right now. We'll have robust Artemis coverage for you this weekend as the first big milestone that we'll see outside of the VAB takes place with the fully integrated rocket and Orion spacecraft make the roughly 4-mile journey, which will take the better part of half a day, potentially up to 12 hours or so, to reach Launch Complex 39B, where teams will start to undergo the final flow before conducting the all-important wet dress rehearsal tanking test, where more than 700,000 gallons of liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen will flow on board the rocket to ensure that teams are ready to proceed towards the launch of Artemis 2. With that, I want to thank our moderators in the chat today for their help. Thanks to Astro Joe and to Jeff Hansen. See, we've got one last super chat that hit it at the buzzer. Thanks to Glenn Ashworth for the $2 super chat, one of our channel members here. I want to also thank channel member Cumulus Granadas for helping to answer folks' questions in the chat. Big ups to our photographers, to John and Adam for getting the cameras situated and running the technical operation of our broadcast here today. If you're not following the fellas at their handles here on X, you can find them at the handles you see on the screen. Also want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for providing support for this mission as well. Most importantly, though, thanks to you for your time and attention. We certainly appreciate you being with us here on this stream and look forward to welcoming you back in our coverage of the medical evacuation undocking of Crew 11. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.